Dr. Afua Cooper as she presents history to us through poetry. Amen?
Good morning, everyone. Good morning. And many thanks to Dr. Porter for this invitation to speak at the African Heritage Month service today. And I want to thank all of you for having me and for showing me such a warm welcome. It's, you know, the African Heritage Month, Black History Month as it's called in some places, is really a time for us to reflect, to celebrate, to act, to continue with our activism for peoples, for all Black peoples, but for all of humanity, to live together in peace. Peace is so important, and equality. So I will share with you some of my poems. I thought I teach a lot about history and research a lot about history, but there's a way we can present the subject matter, and it is through art. And one of the things we've been doing all of this month is art, poetry, culture, performances, singing. And it's really nice when we can celebrate and commemorate our culture. We remember our people, we support the youths who are coming up. So, oh God, let the words of my mouth and the meditations of my heart be acceptable in thy sight. Amen. This poem is called Daily Bread, and people would ask me, why do I write poems? Why do I talk about history so much? And I try to give an intelligent answer all the time, but this one night it really came to me. That was my family. And I thought I'd begin with it because here we are in this church and it feels like I'm with family. And so my grandfather, who is my mother's father, he was an only child, and he made sure he would populate the earth. So he had 8 daughters and 3 sons. So you can imagine I grew up with a lot of aunts. Some of them I met when I was an old kid because they had traveled abroad and they came back. So I thought, well, it's family. That's my inspiration. And here I'm talking about just my family culture. I was born in Jamaica and grew up in a rural area called Westmoreland and then in Kingston, which is the capital. Women talking with ease as they blow hard on the coal to make it catch, as they drop the fish in the hot oil, the smell of snapper fish frying, as small children stone tamarind fruit from the tree down a gully, and their mothers yell at them to stop stoning the tree because the tamarind's still green and will hurt them belly. My red whales come from the hot tar of Kingston streets, of men licking domino and ludo on a Raytown evening, as they argue back and forth about what they would do to bring on Black liberation and why must Black people suffer so? Poems come riding on the waves of a Raytown beach where we go swimming every Sunday morning, and we the little ones stay close to the shore, but the big boys them swim out far, far, and we catch afraid because we think them going drown. But them big boys was born fish. St. Michael was not an angel, but our school overlooking the sea. Our neighbor was a stone castle of General Penitentiary. And as we walk to school every morning, we watch the prisoners in them white uniforms sweep the street and plant flowers. And they encourage us as we pass by to study our books and do well in school. But the teachers did tell some of the boys in our class that they won't turn out to anything good and will end up in prison. And a few of them did. St. Michael was also the All Angels Church where I sat every Sunday afternoon, comforted by rhythms of song sung in Latin, but still unable to experience that mystery. Raytown was just beginning to lose its glitter, but the Myrtle Bank Hotel was still there, and cruise ships still docked in its harbor, and the tree-lined King Street was still majestic, broad avenues and Edwardian architecture, and people could still walk down to the seaside and catch some cool breeze and dream. And back then it was okay for little children to walk home by themselves from downtown. Dark earth poems emerged from annual family gatherings in St. Thomas, the land of rebellion, the land of Paul Bogle, the land of Kumina, as my mother's sisters talk right into the night over fried fish and bami and coffee and sometimes shots of white rum, as they relate over and over again the flight of their father from Westmoreland, how he went to St. Thomas to look for work, how he came back and took the older children, how their mother died, how they wept, how it broke their hearts to leave Westmoreland. My grandfather's daughters, women of slender frame, women very dark of skin with beautiful Yoruba faces, that when I see an aunt I'd never seen before, I want to cry because she looked just like my own mother. And they weep when they see me. They said, "Child, your face is just like your grandfather's." And these women's eyes are coal black with secrets which they whisper to each other when they think the children are sleeping. And some of them smoke with the fire turning at their mouth. And one could hold her liquor better than any man. Another was a superb dancer. And one, of course, was a devout Christian who had a personal encounter with Christ. And in St. Thomas, my cousins emerge from every side. And I see the blood flowing between us, tall and straight like our hero grandfather, ebony skinned like our nomad ancestor, or hair thick and coarse like our tiny progenitor, eyes bright like 1,000 Benin sunrise. And they crown me their princess, a true daughter from their regal ancestry. But since I was a city girl, they take me to the river and we bathe and catch crayfish. And we make up fire by the river bank and roast the fish. And later we go to Mango Bush and pick plenty number 11 mango, plenty Julie mango, plenty East Indian mango. And in the midst of our meeting, our playing, our praying, our feasting, and our loving, these dark earth poems emerge from the bones and blood of our memory. Dark earth poems, dark earth poems, dark earth poems. Come listen, people, come listen to these rhymes. Thank you very much. This one is called My Name is Phillis Wheatley. How many people here know who Phillis Wheatley is? I see 2 hands. Yes, thank you. Well, Phillis Wheatley is, we call her the mother of black literature. She could be also called the mother of world literature. She was the second woman in North, South, the Caribbean islands of the seas, North South America, to have a book published. And she did this when she was 18 years old and she was still a slave. She lived in Boston. Well, Phillis Wheatley was a child of the Middle Passage. She survived the Middle Passage. She survived that journey from Africa on the slave ship. She was 8 or 9 years old. So imagine the terrible things that happened to us as black people is that her ancestors were captured, stolen from Africa, millions and millions of them, and placed in the bottom of slave ships where, you know, the slave ship captain, John Newton, the man who wrote Amazing Grace, he was a slave ship captain. He said the captives were packed together like books on the shelves. So that gives you an idea of how closely packed people were, and had to answer the call of nature while in that position. So I often say to children, or to everybody, there's nothing to be ashamed about slavery, because we here, we are descendants of people who made it to the other side. And imagine the people who made it and survived. They had to be super strong. So you're carrying super strong, super duper DNA because your ancestor made it. And we prayed for those who didn't make it. We prayed for those who were thrown off into the sea and became the meals for sharks. And Phillis Wheatley, imagine being snatched from your parents, never seeing your family again. Never, 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 at the age of 8 or 9. She wasn't unique in that sense, because we know that at least a third of all slave ship cargo was composed of children, even very young babies. Women gave birth on slave ships. So, but when she reported to Phillis, they threw a little piece of cloth on her and she was to die. Well, John and Susanna Wheatley, they came late to the slave market. They had come to buy Mrs. Wheatley a maid girl, or a maid servant. But by the time they came, all the healthy people were sold off. And the captain of the market said to them, don't even buy Phillis, she's gonna die. But Mrs. Wheatley, her heart was moved, and she bought the little girl. And eventually, Phillis was nursed back to health. She became Mrs. Wheatley's personal servant. But Mrs. Wheatley noticed this kid had a great curiosity. She asked her mistress to teach her to read and write. And there were 2 Wheatley kids in the house. And when they would also teach Phillis whatever they learned at school. Phillis learned the English language in no time, and she began to write poetry. And so she was like this guinea pig, this experiment. Can the Negro read? Because her owner experimented on her really to see if black people had intelligence. Could she read? Was she smart enough? And she surpassed everybody's expectations. And started publishing poems in newspapers. And when she was 18, she published her book, Poems on Various Subjects, Religious and Moral. But it wasn't easy, actually, because in Boston, even though she had been going about the place reading poetry to people, no publisher would publish a book, because they said, we're not sure you wrote this, Phillis, because there was still the idea that black people weren't intelligent. We're not sure, maybe it's your owners who are writing this poetry for you. So she couldn't get it published in Boston, and it was eventually published in London, England. So she became this sensation on both sides of the Atlantic. They call her the African genius, the 10th muse, the child prodigy, which she was. But Phillis Wheatley was not her name, because it's the name that she was given once she was bought into slavery. One of the rituals of enslavement is that the slave or the captive has to forget his or her past. And think of it, it makes sense. Because if you were like Thomas Peters, who spent 9 years in Nova Scotia, who was a Yoruba prince, if you knew you were a prince or a princess or came from high esteem, and people were kicking you and whipping you and all of that, you're just gonna go crazy or lose it. So it makes sense that people forget their past, because you're going to remember your mother and your father and your wife and your husband and your playmates. So the slaver said, no, 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 you're going to have to get a new name. Forget all that African stuff. You're a slave and your job is to work for me, right? So one of the unfortunate things about the transatlantic slave trade for us is that we lost our names. So my name Cooper isn't really my name. I don't know my name. Cooper is the name of my father, the name of his father, grandfather, etc. But it's a name originally from Northeast Scotland. It's a Scottish name. I'm not Scottish. The slave master, I know this as a fact, who owned the Africans in that part of Jamaica, his name was William Cooper. So oftentimes they would give all their slaves that name. So we lost our names. And we don't know specifically where in Africa we are from, except now with DNA, we can say this haplogroup, wherever. We can tell now with DNA, and that's a wonderful instrument that people have been using, and it's restoring a lot of our culture back to us. So Phillis Wheatley, imagine her in Boston, and Mr. Wheatley is telling her she now has a new name. So what did it mean for a 9-year-old kid to be told that, your name is not your name? And that, not only that, but you're going to be named after the slave ship that brought you here. The slave ship was called the Phillis. So I'm in Phillis Wheatley's mind. I was named after a slave ship, named after my master and mistress. I, a frightened 8-year-old girl, lost in this new world where the ancient names of my ancestry had no meaning in this country. Phillis, my master said, thy name is Phillis, after the ship that brought you here, and Wheatley, my dear, that is after me and Susanna, your mistress. Could I, a young child, dare to say that's not my name, that I came from lineages as old as the sun, and I did not want this name of Boston? I could not say a word. I simply stood and stared, but my ears had heard and my heart broke into tears. The thought resounded in my head. Named after a slave ship? A slave ship? The vessel that robbed me of my life and family? That's not my name, master. I came from people with names as sacred as the sun, and I do not want this name of Boston. Phillis Wheatley, not Pendawana or Aminata Coulibaly, not Asta Jallo or Fatou Mandiati. I wanted to scream and shout, but my tongue lay dead in my mouth. Yet this man and wife seemed to want to preserve my life. So I closed my eyes and nodded my head, thought of my father, thought of my mother, thought of my sister, thought of my brother, thought of my aunts, thought of my uncle, and then said, yes, master, my name is Phillis Wheatley. Thank you. And here's another story of another woman, Confessions of a Woman Who Burnt Down a Town. Oftentimes, the story we hear of Canada is the final terminal on the Underground Railroad, and that is true, but it's not the whole truth. Like right now, it's Sunday in Canada, but it's Monday in China, or Australia, or New Zealand. So that's the, truth. Sunday in Canada is only part of the truth. So with regards to Canada, we had slavery in Canada. But we have so many stories that reinforce Canada as haven, as the land of freedom. Stories, when you've seen 12 Years a Slave, I hope you go and see it. It's a wonderful film. It's my favorite film for now. But there's a Canadian figure in it, and of course he plays the role of the savior. And it reinforces again this image of Canada as the savior of the blacks or the slaves. And then there's also a play, Kwanda and I were talking about it this morning, Oil and Water. It's based on a true story of the the American naval, the Marine, who was washed ashore in Newfoundland and was saved by the people. And of course, it's a wonderful story. But a part of the reason I suspect that it's been so glorified around Canada is because, again, it puts Canada in a good light. So we need the other stories too. The other stories of people like Marie-Joseph Angélique, who was a slave woman in Montreal, who in 1734 was executed for allegedly burning down that city. It was a major fire, and but when you read through the annals of Canadian history, you won't find anything about this story. It was a major, major thing. So our stories have been buried in these annals, and part of what I do is to uncover these stories. Now, Angélique herself, she was a mother, she had children, but they died, and she was born in Portugal. How a Portuguese black woman ended up in Canada is part of her this ongoing saga of black people being taken all around the world in chains. So this is a meditation on her last days of life, because she was executed. I buried the twins that evening. They died of smallpox. Were only 8 months old. Madame came to the funeral and said to me by way of consolation, "C'est la vie. I too have lost my own." Went back to work in Madame's house that same evening, and at supper she yelled at me and boxed me in the face because I overturned the gravy bowl in her lap. I remember my journey to this island. Monsieur bought me on one of his business trips. He bought me because he said I looked like a healthy wench. He died soon after, and Madame never forgave me, but I had nothing to do with it. He died from consumption. The twins died too. After we buried them that evening, my heart changed position in my chest, and I was seized with one desire and one desire only, and that was to flee the prison of this island of Montreal. But where could I go? Because throughout the whole world, in all the continents, people who looked like me were bound, but still all I could see were my feet running, 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 no chains, no ropes, running free. Madame talking to her best friend and confessor, Father Labadie. "I'm going to sell that negress. She's getting too much for me. She's getting too uppity. And furthermore, since my husband died, I just can't seem to manage. Look a buyer for me, Father. Perhaps the church is interested." I bring in the food and pretend like I never hear. I serve the food good and proper, was on my best behavior. I rolled back my lip and I skinned my teeth. I rolled back my eye and I showed the white. Then I went back to my room in the cellar and I made my plan. Smoke, smoke, too much smoke. Fire, fire, too much fire. I only intend for one house to burn, but it gone bad already, and I run in my feet, unshackled, unbound, running free, running past the city limits, while behind me the fire rage, and my raging heart changed back into its rightful position. He was running too. Claude Thibault from France. Claude Thibault, ex-soldier, ex-criminal, ex-salt smuggler. And I gave him all my food to take me and show me the way to New England or to a port in New York, as I was gonna go home. But he left me while I was sleeping, and the constables then catch me. I don't utter a word as I sit in the jailhouse. And Father Labadie, he come now to confess me, but I refuse. Dear God is not my God. Arson is one of the worst crimes in New France, Marie, he said to me. Confess now and save your soul. Outside, the mob is waiting to rip me from limb to limb, but I'm not afraid. A strange calm fills my body, and I'm at peace, peace, perfect peace. Guilty, the judge pronounced, and the sentence to be tortured. My hands cut off, my body burned, and the ashes scattered to the four corners of the earth. I broke down then, my body crumpled in a heap, and before my eyes I see the twins, and they look so alive, as if they're waiting for me to come and nurse them. They reduced the sentence. Now they're just going to hang me and burn my body. And Father Labadi is back for his confession. And I confess, is I Marie who set the fire? I said yes. I started in Madame's house down by the river. 50 buildings destroyed, the hospital, the cathedral. I said yes. Is I Marie who burned the city? So write that down, Father Labadi. Write down my story. So then we know it, then we know it, then we know it in a them black history. With my heart burning, I take the sacrament and I accept the final rite. Outside, the guard is waiting to take me to my hanging. Outside, the guard is waiting to take me to my burning. Outside, the guard is waiting to take me to my dying. And soon I will be free from the prison of this island, and I will fly and fly and fly. One bright morning, when my work is over, I'll just fly away home. This bright evening, now my work is over, I will fly away home. Petty was all, like a bird, fly, fly girl, go, fly away home. Thank you very much. This one is called, Negro cemeteries. And I use the 19th century or even 20th century terminology Negro. Because it's based on, I took the kernel of a story, which is the Priceville Cemetery in Ontario, just north of Toronto, where they found this cemetery of African people. Some of you may have heard of it. And then around that time, they kept finding these cemeteries, you know, Negro cemeteries, black cemeteries, which had been desecrated, abandoned. And at the same time, this was 1995-96, they started the excavation in the African cemetery, as it was called, as it is called, in New York, Manhattan, in the Wall Street district, as they were digging to put up a new building or new bank or whatever it was. They found all these skeletons, 30 feet below the city, 30 feet below sea level. Hundreds of skeletons. And finally, one of the construction person bust the story to the newspapers because they were just gonna secretly do away with it and put up their buildings. But it was the African cemetery from colonial New York all the way back to the Dutch period, when New York was Dutch, into the English period, into the later American period. The Wall Street district was where black people lived, the slaves, the free, because it was swampy land. Nobody wanted that land. And we know about swampy lands in Nova Scotia that nobody wanted, that they gave to the black people. So likewise in New York, the swampy lands. And they built it up, they drained the swamps, and now they're not there anymore. But you can't hide history, or you certainly can't hide cemeteries. The dead have a way of revealing themselves. And so I'm thinking, what's going on here? Now, if you go to New York, the Wall Street district, you should go and see the monument, because there's a big monument to the African cemetery. And some of these skeletons are at Howard University in the anthropology department. So I'm thinking, look at this irony. Wall Street is now the richest piece of real estate on the planet. That used to be our home. We don't own it anymore. But in Priceville, a similar thing was happening. They kept uncovering these tombstones of black people. And Priceville is no longer a black town. It used to be a black town. Black people were chased out by the incoming Irish and Scottish settlers. So if you go to Priceville today, you're not going to find one black person. Well, a lot of the black people turn white, so their blood is still there. But in truth and in fact, many of them were chased out and they fled to places like Toronto and Owen Sound and Guelph. So with all these cemeteries rising up, I'm thinking, what's going through the air? Who are these people? Who are these skeletons? Who are they? They were teachers, they were preachers, they were soldiers, they were farmers. A man walks on his farm a morning after a thunderstorm. He sees broken headstones pushing through the earth. He rubs the mud off and sees the inscriptions like hieroglyphics, reveal names, dates, ancestry. A cemetery in a field of corn. The local museum said is an old Negro cemetery. And all over Ontario, Negro cemeteries are surfacing, ancestors rolling over, from the fur trader to the loyalist to the mariner from Dominica, demanding we remember them, insisting we reveal their history. All over, ancestors are rolling over, in potato fields, in wheat fields, in corn fields. Like Osiris, they burst from the earth in green resurrection. African skeletons shake the dust from their bones. Skulls with rattling teeth recite litanies of ancient woes. Tongues spout where none existed before and speak in funerary language. Griots rising from their graves and recount the stories of their journeys. The preacher is preaching and singing his psalm. Hafiz tongues uncleave and recite the surahs of the dawn. Babalaos emerge from the storm and divine with their shells and stones. I see the drummers, them a come, them a run, them a come, them a play the talking drum, the batter drum, the djembe, the funde, the long drum, sending electric messages across this land. To Saint Louverture, rise from his dungeon tomb and prophesy. Blood and fire, the Haitian Revolution. And a woman named Dorinda sits on her tomb, a pipe clenched between her teeth, smoke curling from her lips as she recites and recites the stories of her many passages, the stories of her many transformations. And all over, in Halifax, in Dartmouth, in Havana, in San Diego, in Rio de Janeiro, in Kingston, in Kingstown, in Dakar, they say, give us strength, give us strength, give us strength. And we say, rise up fallen fighters, rise up fallen fighters, rise up fallen fighters, rise up, 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 up. Thank you. There's a story of a loyalist man named Richard Pierpoint from Upper Canada, Ontario. And he, like Phillis Wheatley, was a survivor of the Middle Passage. And endured slavery in Connecticut when the British and the Americans started fighting for the 13 colonies in the Revolution. He joined the side of the British and ended up in Upper Canada, which is Ontario. Now, Richard Pierpoint, in 1821, at the age of 77, he wrote a letter to the governor of the province saying he wanted to go back home to Africa. Now this man had been in North America for 60 years or so, and this request really speaks to his alienation within North America and his longing to see his culture once more. And he wrote this petition, which is in the National Archives of Canada. I saw the petition and I wrote about it, but I felt something was missing, because the petition, you know how when you write to authority, you use very formal language, you use that. But I felt as a poet, I saw something else between the page, between the blanks, the blank between the lines, which I thought was a voice of outrage. So it's a poem in 3 parts. It's called Revolutionary Soldier. And when I speak of the War of Napoleon, I'm talking of the War of 1812, because he fought in both wars. Richard Pierpoint, revolutionary soldier, at age 77, is no longer in his vigor. Now his only wish is for the government to send him back to his native settlement. So he writes to the King's Governor this July 1821 letter. The petitioner, Richard Pierpoint, now of the town of Niagara, a man of color, a native of Africa, and an inhabitant of Upper Canada since 1780, most humbly sheweth that His Excellency's petitioner is a native of Bandu in Futa, that at the age 16 I was made prisoner, sold as a slave, conveyed to America, bought by a British officer, served the king during the War of Revolution in a corps called Butler's Rangers, and again during the War of Napoleon in a corps of color, raised right here on the frontier of Niagara. A revolutionary soldier said he was stolen from Africa. In exchange for my freedom, I fought your revolution and raised you new nations on both sides of the division. Now His Excellency's petitioner is now old and without property, and he has much difficulty to obtain a livelihood by his labor. So he wants desperately to return to the land of his mother. So if your Majesty's Governor be so graciously pleased to grant me some relief, I wish it may be by sending me to England, and from thence to Gambia or Senegal, from whence I could return to Futa, because you stole my life. You took me from my wife. You caused my family strife. You stuck in my heart a knife. You cast my people into slavery. You stole the wealth of my country. Now give me my reparations for my long overdue repatriation. I wish again to see the Senegal waters flow. I wish again to see the spotted buffalo. Gaze at the face of the grandchildren. Hold the hands of my brother men. My heart is breaking inside my chest, a prickly pain all through my flesh, a strangulation around my neck where the slave hunters tied the rope. I still hear the screams of my wife as the slave hunters snuffed out her life, and me, them tie up with a rope and a chain and took me to this valley of pain. But I survived the Middle Passage. I survived the years of enslavement. Then I escaped, became a loyalist, and fought on the side of your government. Now I want to go home to rest. So grant me this last request, Mr. Governor. Send me back to Africa, revolutionary soldier. Revolutionary soldier said he was stolen from Africa and he was brought to America. Said he was stolen from Africa and he was brought to Upper Canada. Revolutionary soldier, revolutionary soldier. Revolutionary soldier, Richard Pierpoint. Revolutionary soldier, revolutionary soldier, revolutionary soldier, revolution. Again, I want to thank you, Pastor, for the opportunity, and church. And I must apologize to the senior saints. My back is turned to you. Please accept my apology. I'm thinking of you as I read. The child is alive because through our tribulations we have hope, we have prayer. You know, oftentimes they said, how do the black people manage? You know, you have these people who come into the community and research and they take notes, whether it was 18th century, 19th century, whenever. And they said, you know, those people, they're always praying, they're always singing, they always had hope. And I think it's what has carried us through to this period. Otherwise, we would just jump off in the sea and drown with all these tribulations. But a reason I think for that, and I'm not theorizing, I'm not speculating. We're told by the scientists, by everyone, the Bible, the Garden of Eden, but that humanity began in Africa. And that we are the mothers and fathers of humanity. From us, from the African Eve, in Ethiopia they call her Dinkinesh. And Dinkinesh, there was also a male Dinkinesh. And from those people, the world was populated. Now some of you who are scientists and have that background, and you do the DNA research and we learn about haplogroups, and that Africa is the center of humanity, the cradle of humanity. It's where you find all the haplogroups in the world. The haplogroups are like DNA clusters, right? And so there are these haplogroups, and then there's the out of Africa where people, the Arabian landmass was once upon a time, that Red Sea or the Arabian Sea was not there, or if it was there, it was very shallow. So people could walk across. You know, people could walk north into what is now Asia Minor, into Turkey and those places. And so you find African genetics all over the world. Some of you may have watched the National Geographic film where this guy from the University of Texas, I shouldn't say guy, a scientist, and he's taking people's blood and all over the world, Australia, some of you saw that. And he was in Kazakhstan, in Central Asia, and he was taking these people's blood. And then he came back a few weeks later, and he took this man's blood, and he said to the man, you know, I've traced your haplogroup to Africa. And the man said, oh my God, what a relief. I was coming back to tell me, thought you were coming back to tell me I had cancer. Because he didn't explain to the people properly why he was doing all this blood work. So the man was like, yeah, great, wonderful, I'm so happy. India, everywhere. And so we carry humanity in our DNA. And perhaps that's the reason why our hope has to stay alive. Why we have, you know, a nature that has been remarked upon, a forgiving nature. When slavery ended, in whichever colony, the whites, the Europeans, they felt that the black people are going to rise up and slaughter them. You see it everywhere in the literature, because we kept them in slavery for so long. Now that slavery is over, we've robbed them of their family and labor and wealth. They're going to turn around and slaughter us. The black people, they didn't do that. They just wanted their freedom. They just wanted to go to leave Georgia and go to Maryland and find their wife that they heard had been sold up there. They weren't interested in revenge. They were interested in knitting their families together, whether it was in Jamaica or the United States or Canada. But we've been through the furnace, and we have hope. And I'm urging you to keep hope alive, as Jesse Jackson says. And here's a story of hope, A slave woman is beaten to death. She's pregnant, very pregnant, and another slave woman decides to save the child. And I link the midwife woman to Queen Nanny of the Jamaican Maroons. The Jamaican Maroons, their names resonate here in Halifax, Nova Scotia. And a niece of Granny Nanny, an Akan woman, a woman who can see far, a woman with the knowledge of herbs, a woman who works in the field cutting cane, a woman who speaks the language of her grandmothers, a woman who tells stories of talking trees and of magical animals and of rivers and of great rivers and of fabled cities, a woman who was stolen from her village when she was 14, a woman who flies to Africa when she sleeps. This woman, this niece of Granny Nanny, takes her cutlass and runs with the swiftness of Sobolon Kande in her guise as Buffalo Woman. This woman runs with her machete, an ancient chant rising from her throat, an ancient chant imploring God to come and help them, to come and help this woman give birth. She calls her companions, form a circle around the dead woman, breathe deeply, give her breath, help her to breathe this child. This woman, this niece of Granny Nanny, enters the circle, and with her cutlass, the ancient chant leaping from her lips, cuts open the belly of the dead woman and releases the child. Oh, praise to Onyame, the child is alive. Oh God, save the spirit of the mother. Praises to our God. In the midst of misery and pain, in the midst of humiliation and grief, in the midst of this inhumanity, praises, 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 because the child lives. Our world is turned upside down. Day becomes night and night becomes day, and the dead is giving birth to the living. This woman, this niece of Granny Nanny, this ancient midwife, takes the child, dances with the child, east, west, north, and south, dancing like the priestess she would have been had not slavery stolen her away from her people. She holds the child up to the skies, blessings. Oh, let me surround this child with my warmth. Let me wrap this child with my cloth. Oh, praises to you, oh God. This child lives. Oh, Onyame, take the spirit of the mother. Oh, our world is turned upside down. Day becomes night and night becomes day, and the dead is giving birth to the living. Oh, praise to Onyame. Onyame is the name of God in the Tree language. Oh, praise to Onyame. The child lives. Oh, Onyame, take the spirit of the mother. Praises, praises, praises. Why, why, why? The child is alive. Thank you.
I wish I was never